Hi, it's Malcolm from Aquaspray. If you notice any oil coming from the bottom of your machine, it's probably an oil leak. I'm going to show you in this video series on how to determine where it's coming from and how to fix it. So this is going to be the second part of the video, and the main thing is to drain the oil and then start stripping the pump down to get at the main housing plate here. So first things first, put it on the oil catchment tray, the 22mm. I always take the top off first, although if there's an oil leak, air can get in there, so it's not going to have any trapped pressure in there. Once you take the cap off, you need to make sure that this O-ring is okay and there's nothing untoward from there. Just place that on the side. 13mm spanner underneath. Might be a bit tight, so unscrew that 13mm and drain the oil out. Try not to drop it into the oil. And what you're looking for is this O-ring here. If that O-ring's gone, that will leak oil. Put that somewhere nice. And then round the other side here, which I'll try and spin around a little bit. The oil sight glass is 22mm, and we'll unscrew this as well. Now, this shouldn't be waggly in that when it's loose. It should be still quite a good thread size. If it feels like it's too loose, then the threads on here could be warped or distorted, and you're also checking this O-ring and for any cracks across the glass. And if it's not, you're okay. You can move on to the next stretch. So put that there. So next thing is the Allen key, and you've got 4 Allen keys on the bolt to take the brass pump off. 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. A 6mm Allen key, and then you can just unscrew them and do this while it's draining the oil, and then it'll give it enough time to get as much oil as it can out. Make sure that you keep all the bolts and try and keep everything as clean as possible as you take them out. The bolts aren't too bad, but certainly you don't want any grit going in the pump when you put it somewhere. So a couple of things that you need to bother about when you're taking the pump off is to get a bit of a clean surface. But sometimes it can be a little bit tight. If you put your thumbs on the aluminium and just rock it backwards and forwards, maybe up and down, the pump will just come off. These are brass collars. There's one stuck on the housing here. There's 2 in the top that's stayed into the pump. You're going to make sure that these washers, you don't lose the washers or the seal support ring like that, that's in the seal. If you want to know how the seals come in, are put back in, I do have a video of all these bits and pieces, so I'm not going to go over that today, but I will leave a link in the description. So the main thing is to get all the brass washers, sorry, the plastic washers and the brass collars out. If you're doing this, don't grip it too tight, but you just rock it backwards and forwards, left and right, and up and down, just loosely holding it until it just slides off. Make sure you don't damage it or the O-ring that's on there, or else you'll have to seal a water seal leak. So once you've got all the washers out, it's probably best to prepare this pump by taking these out as well, making sure that the washers are there as well. So keep everything to one side. So you just got the water seals in there. You can just check whether the water seals need replacing if you put your little finger in and can pull these out easily, then chances are they'll need replacing. They don't, but we'll keep dust out of there like that. The next thing is these 4 Allen key bolts. Now these are quite heavy springs behind here, so you don't want to be just taking them all out and then hoping the thing will spring off pretty much. So do it from corner to corner, undo it little by little. So a little bit like that. Once it goes loose, move on to the next one and just keep going round and round, taking it off nice and easily. Well, it's just dripping out, so I'm just going to move that slightly back so it doesn't get all over the place. And once you get it loose enough, you can just take these bolts out. And then evenly just do the last few turns until it pops off. Once that's out, I'll just put that there for now. Move the pump out of the way because we don't need that. If this was all creamy oil, then you would need to change and take the plate off the top and make sure everything's spotless before you put anything back. This oil is pretty good, so I'm going to just leave that in there for now, unless you needed to change the main motor seal, which I will be doing on this machine shortly after this video is finished. If you don't need to take that out, don't take it out for now. Take the pistons out, and again, if they were needing cleaning, make sure that they get cleaned. These brass collars sometimes can be a bit of a pain to get out, which is definitely going to be the case with this one. Almost certainly. That one was easy. Quite corroded in there, which is why it's quite hard to get out. If there was any leaks from these seals, it would be dripping into this housing and then through the holes at the bottom, and that's where you would see the oil leak coming from. It's not leaking oil, although I am going to change them on this one just to show you, if I can get them all out, that is. It's quite badly corroded. The idea of me putting a rag over the top or something, if that screwdriver slips, it's going to go through your hand. So that is to prise it gently but firmly. And sometimes you can just hear that click to where it breaks the seal and pops it out. So this is where you need to clean all this up, all this grit and where the aluminium's gone, that's all going to have to be cleaned up, because all that will be wearing out the pistons as they go in and out. The O-ring seal, if you just pinch it, he says, it will just come off like that. So we're going to be changing that O-ring. We're also going to be changing these seals. So this is the tool for the extraction of the seals, and it just fits. You can get in there close. The groove at the end just fits under the first lip of that seal. It fits into this housing, so just underneath the lip. And the idea is to make sure that it doesn't slip by putting something there, and just ease it out nice and gently. Pop. There's your seal. This one's going to be a little bit harder because of the corrosion. Sometimes if you just gently get rid of the corrosion a little bit more, and maybe a little bit of oil just to help it under the lip, and then ease it back, and then it will just pop out. And the last one under the lip, put something so it doesn't slip, and ease it out. So they're the seals that we're going to be replacing. Just need to clean this housing up, making sure that there's no grit in there, and then we'll reseat the oil seals. So it's all nice and clean now, all inside and out, making sure that these holes are free of any debris as well. Let's change the seals. So in the seal kit you get 3 oil seals and the O-ring for the back. So you're going to make sure there's nothing in this groove all the way around to fit this O-ring in. The O-ring fits in the groove nicely. Then your seals. So with a little bit of lubrication into the holes, let them go in a little bit easier. You don't have to overpack them. I'm not a fan of overpacking the grease. And then they go spring side down. So if you put them on, if you always try and remember that the spring side, or the U side of it, is what captures the oil. So if it's that way in there, the oil's going to come out, so it's face down. So with them, just fit it in and literally just push it, and just keep pushing. Sometimes they're really tight, and the tool grease all over my fingers now. Just literally push in. The tool actually comes out the other side, so you can't push them down onto a bench. So you'd need to have some sort of spacer. And push them in. Now what you can do, sometimes if you have a socket that is the correct size, you can push them in like so. You just got to make sure that you don't damage the actual seal when it's going in. That one's not actually that far in. Just push that a little bit more. So when the seals are pretty much flush with the second lip in there, that is when they're fully home. You want to grease this O-ring up as well, just so it can slide into the housing nicely. Try not to get too much grease inside, because that'll change your oil a different colour, and you won't know whether it's got milky water in there or what. So make sure it's all completely dried, free of any debris that could be where the piston's out, running backwards and forwards, and then we'll reassemble that. So make sure all these are clean inside and out if you're going to be putting these on yet. Certainly the glass at the side. Don't need to put the top on yet because we need to fill it with oil. But certainly the sump plug, make sure that's all nice and clear and clean, and the O-ring's good. There you go. So the idea is to get the keyway at the top of the shaft, and then just slot the keyway in. Make sure you got this shaft at the top, cut out for the keyway, and then use your thumbs to just slide it on. Then what you want to do is turn it upside down so you can fit the ring, the bearing, and the front brace, and it won't fall off. With that done, of the main housing plate to put back on. What we need to do is just put a little bit of grease where the pistons are going to be sat through, and then insert each piston, so spring, piston retainer and the piston. Then we can just bolt that back on. So with the wobble disc in the place, it's always best to start in that top corner, because you can always get a couple of threads on it without any spring pressure. So once you've got a couple of threads on it, this is where you need to pinch it in with your thumb and start this corner off as well. Now at present, if you look at it, it's not very even, and you need to be able to tighten this nice and evenly. So always try and get all the bolts in and started. And once you've got them started, and they start to move, 1, 2, 3, just keep going round. Make sure this goes on as even as possible. If you trap that O-ring, you'll be back to square one with an oil leak. So once you get really close where the actual O-ring is here, that's where you don't want to trap it, so you take it easy and you take it a little bit slower now. And just keep going until you start to feel it butt up right to the aluminium plate. Like that one is, and that one is. Now that one, and that one, and then just give them that extra little torque in opposite corners. So that's that done. So normally while I've got this, the sump plug on, the oil glass on, all the fronts on, there's no way that the oil should be able to leak from here. But I would fill this oil up first. So now the oil's full, I can put the tap on. While I'm reassembling all the pump, if there's any leak, I'll be able to notice it from now. So reassembling, maybe a little bit of grease on the pistons. Spacers for the oil seal go on first. Just really tighten that housing there. A little bit of grease on the back end to hold all the seals in place. There is a video on how to change the water seals if you lose which way these go. I always put the hole at the top. That's that done. A little bit of grease, mainly to just hold this washer in place because it doesn't really need so much grease. And then we should just slot that on like so. Now I know one of the brass collars is quite tight in there, so it's not completely home. So I'm going to tighten these up evenly again to draw it into its correct seated position. So once they're home, just giving that little bit extra nudge. Again, not too tight. As long as they're even, it's a good thing. And that is it. The oil seals are done. What we need to do now is to really test it, give it a really good run, make sure there's some clean rags underneath or something so you can see if any oil's dripped out. Apart from that, let's plug it in, give it a test, and away we go.